Hi, I'm Jordan RUDESS, and welcome to my new video. The focus of this video is on my live system and what it takes to accomplish a live performance as a modern keyboardist. We'll explore what kind of sounds I use, the kinds of controllers I use, and examine everything that I do to create music on stage. When I play live, you'll notice that I only use one keyboard. This keyboard acts as the master controller from my live system, which usually contains several rack units that are triggered by the master controller. I prefer this setup to one where you have multiple keyboards on the stage because I like the idea of keeping my hands focused on the keys so that when I switch sounds, the musical flow isn't broken. Instead of using several keyboards, I can switch whole setups just by using a foot pedal. The great thing about modern technology is that there are very powerful master controllers out there now that can send MIDI signals out to all the different instruments I use, so that when I use my program change pedal, I can switch sounds on all the instruments in my system simultaneously. When I play live with Dream Theater, I use the Kurzweil 2600 keyboard on stage. I also use three 2600 racks, a Korg Triton rack and a Korg Karma keyboard, which are all controlled by the main Kurzweil K2600. When I play with Rod Morgenstein in the RUDESS Morgenstein project, very often all I'll use is the K2600. On my new album, Rhythm of Time, I use the Korg Triton Extreme when I play live. So even though my system is always changing, the central concept remains the same because I always have one very powerful keyboard that controls the world. Let me unravel a little bit of the mystery of how I'm able to use just the one keyboard in my live setup. When I play a patch on the main keyboard, it communicates with all the modules in the system through MIDI, which allows me to send different messages to different keyboards all at the same time. For instance, if I set one of my racks to receive on MIDI channel 15, any signals I send out of the master controller on channel 15 will automatically go to that rack. At the same time, I could be sending a completely different set of information to one of the other racks on a different MIDI channel. Combine this with the fact that there are 8 zones on my master controller, and suddenly it's very possible to do a lot of complicated splits, where I have different sounds mapped to different areas of the keyboard, and layers where multiple sounds are stacked on top of each other. In addition to that, when I use the sliders to manipulate the sound, I can actually send out different messages to different keyboards, all by moving just the one slider. For example, when I move slider A, I can send panning information to the Korg Karma, which will pan the sound from left to right, or vice versa. And that same slider can also be sending information to one of my Kurzweil racks to fade in or fade out. This makes it much easier to manipulate the sound live because I may only have to adjust one slider. In general, I like to use 4 different pedals. The first pedal is a damper, which functions just like it does on a piano, so that when I press the pedal, the notes will sustain. The second pedal is my program change pedal, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the most important pedal in my system because it's the pedal that allows me to switch between one big setup to another. The third pedal is actually a continuous controller, which is different from the other pedals because unlike the damper or program change pedals, which send only on and off messages, the continuous controller can send constant messages, so I can do things such as a volume change, or a wah-wah effect, or control a filter on a particular sound. Finally, I use my fourth pedal to trigger organ effects, such as the Leslie and rotary effect. Another interesting element of my rig is a product called the MusicPad Pro. It allows me to view files while I'm playing, such as notation, text, or things that I've scanned into my computer. My role as a keyboardist is a very exciting one. First of all, I'm very interested in sound creation. Secondly, I'm responsible for creating not only the standard piano, orchestral, and electric type sounds, but also for triggering all kinds of different samples. For instance, in Dream Theater, we often use a lot of different sound effects. Sometimes it's a spoken word effect, and other times it's some wild machine sound or some big hit out of nowhere. And the keyboardist is the one that's responsible for triggering all of these events live. Almost anything that is not a guitar, bass, or drums very often ends up being played by keyboards. As a modern-day keyboardist, a lot more goes into a performance than just playing the black and white keys. And I've built a whole technique which utilizes the pitch wheel, the mod wheel, the various ribbons that come on all the keyboards, as well as all the sliders and switches. For instance, when I play my lead sound, I'll use switches to slowly bring in different harmonics, and I'll use the pitch wheel for pitch bend and vibrato. The mod wheel I use slightly differently from most people because instead of triggering vibrato, I'll use the mod wheel to gradually change the harmonics within my lead sound so that one harmonic fades into the other. One thing I learned after coming out of classical music school is that there's a lot more to playing keyboards than just triggering a particular note event like on a piano. Once you play a note on a keyboard or synthesizer, you can then do things like press into the keyboard and cause aftertouch effects, or you can move one of the controllers and drastically change the sound. The most important change when you move from the acoustic world to the electric world, however, is pitch bending. Just like on a violin, a guitar, or a trumpet, you can take the sound and add your own stylistic personal expression through pitch bending and vibrato. An interesting thing is that whenever I go on tour, I'm always the one who's carrying the most hand luggage, and that's because being the keyboardist also involves keeping a lot of data around. Data for all the instruments and backups of all that data. Anyone that uses electronic devices with data storage must be equipped with backups just in case something happens. So for every one of my instruments that has a hard drive in it, I'm also carrying a backup of that hard drive. This adds up to a lot of extra cartridges, discs, and compact flash cards that hold the different types of media that are necessary to create my sounds. I hope that you find this video informative and that it helps you become a better musician and a more effective keyboardist. Now dust off your keyboards, crank up the volume, and get ready to learn. This sound is a great example of a simple split keyboard. In this case, I have an organ that's playing in the lower section of the keyboard and strings that are playing in the upper section. Also of note is that I can actually play the same octave in two different places in the keyboard. And this is because I have the exact same sound assigned to two different zones and transposed. This enables me to do that kind of bouncing effect. The beauty of this part is that by using a simple split keyboard, I can play the string line with my upper fingers and keep the bounce going in my right hand, like. And then between the two hands, it's techniques like this that I use to try to get a little bit closer to the albums. And when we play live, people can say, oh wow, that's just like the album. In the song Great Debate, there was a section on the album where I did two completely different things, and I was wondering how I was going to pull that off live. Well, it ended up being the kind of thing that's a split keyboard, so I have two very distinctly different sounds, but I also had the challenge of being able to modulate or control those sounds in different ways. And I ended up using my foot pedal to actually filter and bring in different effects into the mix. So in the right hand, I've got this kind of line. When I move the pedal, it's making the sound brighter and less bright. In the left hand, I have this percussive effect.
And as I move the pedal, it not only makes it brighter, but it adds more depth to the effects, like the reverb and the echo. So together, you get this. One of my favorite splits is in the song Fatal Tragedy, where I have an extremely heavy sound in my left hand. And in the right hand, I've got a massive organ. Together, it's... Da-da! In the song Beyond This Life, I have a really interesting split, which uses a mellotron-type flute sound in the left hand. And in the right hand, there's an extremely haunting sound, a little bit like strings or voices. And together, the sound makes this. Also in the song Beyond This Life, there's a section that John Petrucci goes off and plays a very wild and fast lead section. And on the album, the rhythm guitar continued playing a very heavy line. So the question was how to do that live. Again, anything that can't be done by the band in general has to be done by the keyboardist. So I decided that I would take my whole left hand and devote that to playing a very heavy sound using a guitar patch. A lot of times when I play with Dream Theater, people say, "Oh, I couldn't hear you." And I have to say, well, you know what? You're not quite sure what I'm supposed to be playing, because sometimes I'm playing a guitar sound, and sometimes I'm playing a string sound, or sometimes I'm playing a sound that's maybe entirely new. In this case, in the lower section of the keyboard, I've got this riff. In the right hand, I've got the organ. So together, another really cool example of a split keyboard would be found in the song Finally Free, where I have a very haunting sound in the bottom section of the keyboard. In the middle section of the keyboard, I have tubular bells. So together, you get this effect. In the song Finally Free, I created a split which uses kind of a massive sound in the lower section of the keyboard, and then in the top is a completely different sound, which is actually like a lead sound. So I'm able to play a chord, and play the lead. Well, notice that while I hold the chord, I can manipulate the pitch wheel and not affect the pitch of the chord, but only affect the pitch of the lead sound. That's one of the master control type functionalities that I use a lot. Let me play this section for you, and you can see when I switch to that particular patch how it flows live. Within our instrumental medley, there's a section that's actually taken from the Liquid Tension Experiment, the song Universal Mind. It's an interesting thing to pull off live because originally the riff was written by John Petrucci, and it's a very fast riff, and it's joined by the keyboard. On the album, we had a very kind of heavy guitar playing supportive notes to the riff, and so the challenge was, how would we do this live? And I knew that if we both played the riff, that the bottom would kind of drop out. So what I did is I split the keyboard so I could actually have guitar, and in the live case I added some heavier synth sound to it. So the end result is that it's heavy, and also we have the fast parts. So the bottom of the keyboard sounds like this. Meanwhile, the right-hand section sounds like this. Together, the two parts sound like this. I'd like to introduce to you the concept of layering. It's something that I do all the time, and it's very standard, if you will. What I can do is I can take one sound, like in this sound, we might hear a piano. Then simply I can add one more layer, and it could go off to another instrument and play a string sound. And I can put them together and assign them to the same keyboard area, since each zone or each layer is completely assignable to whatever area of the keyboard that I want. In this case, you can clearly hear the piano and the strings mixed together. As the song progresses, I add some more elements. Like now, I've added a brass sound to the mix. And really, I can stack many, many different sounds because of all the instruments that I use, the master controller, the racks. I can have 20, 30 layers, no problem. In my world, even the simplest thing is complex. Take this next sound, which sounds a little bit like a brass sound. But if you go into it a little deeper and take it apart, you've got these elements. Almost like a sine wave type sound. Something very thin. A weird, bizarre brass sound. More of a standard trumpet. Voice. Another kind of voice. Put it all together and you've got... In this particular patch, if I press one of the switch buttons, I can bring in other layers that actually have the same sound assigned to the same keyboard area, but that are transposed. So I can play one note, let's say a C, hit the button, to get an augmented chord. So as I play, I can play single notes, or hit the button and get those chords. So the part One day when we were working on the song Beyond This Life, Mike Portnoy said to me, I really want to have like a really cool Zappa type section in this part. Maybe you could compose something that's very much in that style. And I thought, well, that might be a really fun project. So I took the project home and I worked on it a bit, thinking about, all the Zappa-isms and that type of wild flavor. And I came up with a very cool sound, which then led to the kind of note choices that I made. In this particular sound, it features about 5 different layers, things like this do vocal sound, a smoother one on the other side of the stereo perspective, standard brass sound, a very short kind of vocal attack, and even an electric piano sound. Put them all together and you've got, in addition to that sound, I've also got another layer of brass. And one more. All those sounds together make up this whole section. That whole section is followed by an extremely quirky unison line that I had a lot of fun programming. And using the power of these synthesizers and all the multiple layer and combination ideas, I was able to come up with something like this. First I'll play the whole sound. It kind of sounds like one sound, but I think there's like 12 or 13 layers that are sounding in there. Here they are. Trumpet. Very quick vocal sound, electric piano, your xylophone sound, another brass sound. That's kind of like a bass being played up way high. Some like a synced synthesizer sound, an analog kind of brassy sound, another sync sound. Another layer of the xylophone. All together make this. In the song Dance of Eternity, there's a part that's a honky-tonk piano sound, and I always get comments about that part and how cool people think that it is. Basically what happened is that we had a riff that was a very serious kind of riff in the middle of this wild instrumental section. It was like and we were having, the guitars just kind of plowing through it. And I thought it would be humorous if in the recording session I just kind of threw out the idea of playing a honky-tonk piano. And everybody really reacted and thought it was funny. And so we decided to use it. And it worked out well because it was just a real kind of sigh of relief amidst all the serious instrumental stuff. So when it came time to play it live, I decided to take it even beyond just the honky-tonk piano part and add a little bit more to it. So there's a couple of things going on in this sound. For one, if I play one key in this lower section of the keyboard, I can not only get the one octave, but I also will get the lower octave. On the same key, you've got an upright bass sound. So if we put that all together, you've got in the left hand and a honky-tonk in the right, which make another fine Dream Theater and Liquid Tension honky-tonk moment is actually part of the instrumental medley these days. And what I want to point out is that in this one, I added some acoustic bass to the lower keys, so you get piano and the bass together. But there's also an octave effect on some of the upper keys of the piano. So if I play up here, you've got 2 octaves. So if I play octaves here, the end result is you're hearing 3 octaves being played simultaneously. So it creates this almost like, 3 or 4-handed piano effect. In addition to that, live, I decided it would be very effective to put a sampled sound at the top of a run that I play. And why don't I just play the thing, and you can hear at the end when I reach the final key that there's a very cool slide whistle effect. There's a very powerful layer at the end of Finally Free. It's a very melodic sound and it's very rich. It uses 4 different sounds that are layered. One of the sounds is actually only part of the lower section of the keyboard, and that's like a Taurus bass pedal type sound. Let's check it out. You've got the piano, and then you've got a voice sound, and you also have strings, and finally you have At the end of Finally Free, there's a great big sound that the band plays as Mike Portnoy goes wild on the drums. The way that I've worked it out on the keyboard is that it starts out with a string sound, and when I hit the keyboard very fast, or you could say very hard, it brings in this rocket blast type sound, which sounds a little bit like this. So, here's the string sound. And even if I turn on the rocket blast sound, but still play the keyboard lightly, you won't hear that blast until I give it a good smack, so I can do this. That's the first level. The next level up is where I have the strings, piano layered with that, the blast if I hit hard, and finally a large brass sound. Altogether, the progression is like this. First the lighter one. One of the things that I really like to do is to add a percussive layer to a sound. So like in this example from the RUDESS Morgenstein project's Over the Edge, I have this pitch sound. And this percussive sound. If I put them together, I get this. The first time that I introduced this percussive concept with Dream Theater was in the song Home from Scenes from a Memory. We were playing this part, and I thought it would be really cool if we had some tabla, and obviously no one plays tabla in our organization, so I took it on and it was my job. So under each note that I played, I put a different tabla drum. So it sounds like we have this very, very tight little guy playing in the background. In the song In the Name of God, we have the reappearance of our tabla player, along with the sitar player. One of the largest sounds of the evening is at the end of the song In the Name of God. I have a huge layer with brass and strings and piano and choir and timpani and chimes. Check out these layers. First, the brass. Piano. Strings. Finally, timpani, voice, chimes, and choir. All together make this. In this example, I have the piano, the glockenspiel, and the flute mixed together in a layer in the right hand, and in the bass I have the piano and an upright bass. So now that we've looked at some of the ideas of layering and splitting the keyboard, let's go in a little deeper to the idea of what I can do with one keyboard and switching very quickly. This next example is probably one of the best examples of getting through sounds really rapidly, where in the old days it would take a long time to go reach my hand over here and reach my hand over there, and there would probably be a gap in the sound. Let's look at this particular selection from the song Endless Sacrifice, where I have 4 different program switches that are very quickly advanced by my patch change pedal. The first sound is piano. Then if I play down lower, it mixes timpani with it. The second one has more of like a percussive xylophone effect mixed with piano. And down here, and a special crash cymbal sound on that particular E, followed by a patch that has a few different sounds mixed within it. That, and so 4 different things in different areas. And the last sound in the group is the piano. Now let's put it all together, and I'll use my patch change pedal to make it all happen. After the sound effects section of Dance of Eternity begins, there's a whole progressive kind of instrumental section that features a number of patch changes. And I want to show this to you because you can really appreciate how I can control many sounds from one keyboard and use my foot switch to cycle through. And the changes happen fairly quick. First, I'll show you the different sounds that are part of the different setups. The first sound has the and like a piano and mellower synth sound in the left hand. The second one has kind of a heavy chord, but in the left hand, a lighter sound, because it really is it's a riff that's played by the guitar and the bass. So this just helps it out a little bit. Followed by this sound, which then goes back to a different sound, which plays this. To piano. So let's follow that through. I'll play that from the top and you can see how it's changing. So every time you hear a different sound, remember that it's one little foot switch that's changing between the entire sound on the keyboard. One of my very favorite sounds is the layer and split in Fatal Tragedy. It uses piano, strings, some space noise, like a 12-string guitar, and some very cool voice sounds and bass voice. Put it all together and you've got this. The live extension of that sound is where you have the same bottom part. But originally one of my ideas in the studio was to play like arpeggiated patterns in the right hand. So together you have this. At the end of the song Spirit Carries On, in the studio there was a lot going on. I played an organ patch, I played a piano patch, I added a Taurus bass pedal. In addition to that, I conducted a gospel choir. So the real challenge was how to produce that sound live, and I really didn't want to sacrifice anything. So I spent a good amount of time programming everything and getting most of it in there. In addition to all that, I wanted to have the last phrase that Teresa sang in its complete form. So I used the function of ignore release on my Kurzweil to actually sample that. And now when I press that key, it plays the entire recording of her singing. So let's first look at the first sound in the group and examine it just a little bit. You have your piano, the synth pad, the choir, organ, which can also be affected by the Leslie, which, by the way, is just one pedal that I have pre-assigned to do the rotary function, as well as Taurus, And the Taurus bass pedal is actually mapped in two different spots, so it doesn't interfere with the organ. So as I'm playing the chords, I can easily get the Taurus to be exactly where I want it to be. So that's the first sound. The second sound does a couple of things. For one, when I first hit the chord, I get a very big chord. And by moving the slider down, I can get rid of the bulk of the chord and just leave the piano, which leaves me all the space to hit this wonderful low note which has Teresa singing. So let's put it all together, and I'll show you exactly how that part flows. In the song In the Name of God, we took one of the spacey piano patches that I was playing, and we actually reversed the whole recording in Pro Tools, and it created this really neat effect. But of course, that created a small problem for me, which was how am I going to do it live? Because you can't just take something and reverse it unless I recorded the whole part, but then you have the whole issue of synchronizing with the band. So I decided to do it a different way, and what I did was I took one of my physical controllers and I used a reverse reverb algorithm to actually fade that in to make the sound appear as if it's being played backwards. But you don't hear that until I start moving the slider. So here's the effect. In the song About to Crash, I had played several parts in the studio. The challenge was how to take those different parts and play them live. Here are the different sections that I played. First, the piano part. Easy enough by itself, but in this particular section, I also had a lead line played on a synth solo sound, which was in a similar register to the piano. So what do? So what I decided to do was I'd keep the right hand in the middle of the keyboard where it normally would go. But for the melody line, which would also go towards the middle, I had to put that in my left hand, and I put it at the bottom of the keyboard, and I transposed it up. So I'm able to play the piano part in the right hand and the lead synth line in the left hand for this effect. In the song Test That Stumped 'Em All, there was another challenge that I had to face to play live, and that was that there's a very fast riff that John Petrucci and I play together. On the album, he also recorded a very heavy guitar part underneath it, so I didn't want to let that go for live. So that was one challenge. So for me to play the guitar part and get it to sound heavy, that was the first thing. The second part of it was that I had played this big octave kind of skipping while the fast part was going. So what I did was I split the keyboard, so I got this fast sound in that area of the keyboard, and the heavy sound a little bit lower than that on the keyboard. And then on the switches, I actually made it so that some sounds would continue in the same octave as they were playing, but others would jump up octaves. So both switches are being used to change octaves of different sounds within this section, like this. Let's listen to that section all together. Sometimes playing along with the guitar parts can be challenging. In this particular section and test that stumped them all, I had to use a combination of programming skill and also finger skill to make it happen. Because, on the guitar you can repeat a note very fast. On the keyboard generally you don't do that so much. So a couple things came into play. One thing was creating a sound that was heavy. The other thing was using a technique that would enable me to repeat a note very fast. So what I do is I use, in this case, 3 fingers, and I basically swipe at the keys with all of them, the same key over and over again. While I'm swiping at the key, I'm also using one of the sliders to actually control one of the parameters of synthesis. So it's taking the sound and it's modulating the sound. Exactly what it's doing is it's opening up the filter of the sound. So it sounds like this. So I swipe at the keys to create this rhythm while I move the slider. In the song Solitary Shell, there's a little bit that kind of really fits into the mix and it's hard to hear, but it demonstrates a really interesting technique, and I'd also like for you to hear it now. The way that this works is that I can hold a chord in this area of the keyboard, and on this patch, by moving the pitch wheel, it will do absolutely nothing. But up top, I've got another sound. On this sound, if I move the pitch wheel, it will bend the pitch. The way that this works is whatever key that my finger is on is the key that will bend. Everything else, even if it's held by the sustain pedal, won't bend. So here's what I mean. I can play the chord, play this note, and that will bend. So even within the same sound, this sitar sound, those notes can hold, but the finger being down on the key will enable me to bend only that note. Very much like a pedal steel effect. So. At the end of 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, the main theme returns, and this time it's bigger and huger than ever. The sound was actually inspired by the instrument, the Korg Karma. And when it came time to put this on the album, I decided to use that sound since it was the original inspiration, but also kind of heighten it and intensify it by adding some other elements. So I'd like to play for you the sound that inspired the whole patch first. This is just the Korg. Then I added to that some brass, some strings. When I put it all together, it created this. Over the years, I've created some sounds which I consider to be signature sounds, especially my lead sounds. There are two main sounds that I use at this point. One's a fairly direct lead sound, meaning that it doesn't have a lot of frills attached to it. The other one is more like kind of like a wild guitar lead sound that features like feedback and wah and different like effects coming in. Let me first go into my main cleaner lead sound and show you the various elements, because even though this is a kind of pure and bright sound, it still has many layers that kind of make it tick. And it took a while to put together to really get the blend I needed. First of all, you have a clarinet waveform that's going through like a gain staging. It's one of the algorithms on the 2600 Kurzweil. Here's what it sounds like. If I backed off on the gain, you can kind of hear its clarinet quality. Also, one of the layers is a flute waveform, but it gets louder as I press into the keyboard, so I can get a little bit of that feedback effect. The third layer is a sawtooth waveform. It's a nice bright sound that'll cut through. And then I've got an actual guitar waveform. Followed by another one. That's a little bit purer and smoother. And then another flute sound, which gives some more of that aftertouch kind of feedback. Then I use an English horn oboe combination. In addition, another sawtooth. That's that kind of a smoother, just the attack portion. And then a sine wave. It's very light by itself, but in the mix it adds a little bit of thickness and purity to the sound. Now let's put it all together and listen to a section of Fatal Tragedy. This part we call the Shrink and Grow section. This is a lead from Home. Here's the unison section from the song Blind Faith. After your lead sound is completely constructed and you get the sound that you want, you have to develop some kind of control of the various parameters that let you be individual and expressive. For me, that meant really getting my own technique of using the pitch bend, because the whole style of vibrato and bending pitch is kind of what gives a personality to a player. So for me, the pitch wheel is an extremely important expressive tool. Let's look at a couple of the techniques that I use with the pitch wheel. First of all, of course you can bend the pitch up or down. One thing that I do is I like to set my pitch wheel so that from the middle position where it rests, you can bend up a whole step and down an octave. This lets me do things like I can slide into a pitch with varying intervals, like I can go directly into it with a very close, quick interval, or have a long swoop into a pitch. It's kind of like a whammy bar type of thing. The next important thing to learn is vibrato. At one point in my career, I decided not to use the mod wheel for vibrato because I realized that on every instrument except for like a synthesizer or electronic instrument, when they do vibrato, you have varying degrees of speed and depth on the instrument. Like imagine a violinist playing and vibratoing very fast and wide or slow and deep, and all that type of personal approach is what makes the sound. So when I abandoned the mod wheel for vibrato, I had to learn a technique with the wheel, and it really helped me make a style. So now, here's an example of a nice wide, slow vibrato. Or just a fast kind of subtle shake. So all these kind of things are used when I play. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to start above the pitch. Let's say I'm playing this note, but I'll bend the wheel up and bring the wheel down into the pitch. So. Also, I use the ribbon a lot. The ribbon lets me do wild stuff, like these kind of trills that aren't necessarily half steps, they're not whole steps, they're more like quarter tones, and they sound really unique. So I can go. The other thing I like to do on the ribbon is the kind of like whammy dive effect, which I really could do on the pitch wheel, but it's fun to do it on the ribbon. So like, I also like to sweep the pitch way up because it's set for an octave. Like, it's just another fun controller to take advantage of. The other lead sound that I like to play is a very aggressive sound that's kind of like a guitar that's ready to feed back or that's a little bit uncontrollable. And that's the cool thing about it, is that unless you're really careful with the various controllers that bring in all the different feedbacks, it can really get out of hand. So the cool thing about this sound is it's very electric guitar-like in that it's something that you have to harness and learn to control. Here are some examples. Watch when I hold a note and I hit one of the switches, how feedback can come in on a lag, which means it'll take a little time before you'll actually hear the fundamental go away and the harmonic come in. With the other button, when I hold a note and hit that, you get more of the high octave. On the wheel, I have it set up so that you can crossfade between different harmonics. This is what that sounds like. Let's put it all together now, and I'll show you how I can use all the controllers to shape the lead sound. Here's a lead from This Dying Soul. This is a lead from Endless Sacrifice. This is the second lead from Endless Sacrifice. Here's another example of using the controllers to shape the lead sound. A very important time in the live performance schedule is the time right before you hit the stage. I usually like to spend some very focused time warming up and loosening up. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the warm-up exercises that I do on the keyboard. For one, especially before a performance, I use a metronome because the excitement sometimes builds and it's easy to feel a little nervous or a little rushed. And part of the exercise and the warm-up is staying really calm and kind of, in your body and in place. And the metronome really helps that. I'll show you one of the very basic exercises that I do, and then we'll kind of graduate it from there. First of all, I put on the metronome. What I'll do is take all 5 fingers from C to G in both hands, all white notes, and I just go back and forth with the metronome. And then, of course, you can do it in minor. So now, instead of C, D, E, F, G, you'll play C, D, E flat, F, G. Now, what I do is I take that same thing from C, C major, C minor, and I do it in every key. I'll just start it so you can see what it's like. Minor. Next key, D flat major. D major. D minor. A way to really bring yourself into focus is to turn your metronome on and play in your right hand from C to G as you were. But while doing that, you'll start now with your left hand on E, and you'll go back to C, and then continue on with the exercise as usual. So the E is now your downbeat in the left hand. So together it's... and then minor. And you can try that with your right hand starting on E and your left hand starting on C. So the right hand would start like this. And the left hand would be just the basic. One thing my teacher always told me is to spend a little bit more time focusing on the weaker fingers, which in most people's cases are your fourth finger and your fifth finger. So to do that, I might play something like this. Another great way to warm up is traditional scales. Some people see them as boring. I see them as important. Here we go. The chromatic scale. Turn on your metronome. Now my fingering for chromatic scale is 1-3, starting from C, 1-3, and then 1-3, and then when you have two white notes in a row, you can go 1-2-3. So 1-3, 1-3, 1-2-3, 1-3, 1-3, 1-2-3. So actually the next time you get to C, as you continue going up, you would actually land on your second finger on the white note C. So with the left hand, it's also 1-3. 1-3, 1-3, and then 2-1 on the two consecutive white notes, E to F. So 2-1, 2-1. Now together. Also notice when I'm warming up, I don't get the whole arm involved in the playing. Actually, whenever I'm doing something technical, I try not to get a lot of physical arm motion involved in the strength that it takes to play. If my arm moves at all, it's because I want to keep my elbows loose and just make sure that I'm relaxed. So if I'm playing, if I go like that with my elbow, which I would never do that much, it's just to kind of remind myself that this part is loose and it's the fingers that actually are the strength. So each finger is like a little hammer on the keyboard by itself. That's the goal. The next level up of playing chromatic scales is to actually separate the hands so you start on different notes. So like you could start on C in the left hand and maybe E flat in the right hand and go up and down, but keeping it in sync, again with the metronome. A different kind of practice would involve playing as fast as I can just to see how loose I am. And I'll do that a lot with the chromatic scale, just to run it and see if I can go from the bottom to the top. It's another way to kind of maintain focus. Whatever speed you're at, whatever playing ability you have at the moment, try to push yourself a little bit just to go fast and see if you can ride the thing through. So in this case I switched to a lead sound because it's kind of fun to have some different timbres when you're practicing. So here we go. Another exercise that I'll do before going on stage is called the Brahms exercise. It's pretty easy to comprehend in the sense that it's just all 5 fingers and you're playing consecutive notes chromatically. So like from C, you would just play in half steps up to E. So C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, and back with both hands. The left hand starts on the 5th finger and the right hand starts on the thumb. I recommend again putting on your famous metronome. When you're done with C, try it again from C sharp. And from D. And continue all the way up the chromatic scale, maintaining the same fingering. And then what you should do is start your left hand on C and your right hand on E. Chromatically up. And really try to lock into the beat. It helps your focus. and go all the way up through all the different keys. Once you've done the Brahms exercise, then you can throw a little RUDESS into it. And by that I mean, take the beginning of the Brahms exercise, but after you play it once, going up and down, then expand your hand. And I pick different chords for the purpose of this exercise. Let's say we'll take a dominant 7th chord. So I play up, and then I expand and I play a C dominant 7th chord. So, at the top, when I hit C again, I do the same chromatic, going down and back to C. And then I come down the dominant. So, and then C, E, G, B flat, C, now chromatically down, B, B flat, A flat, and back up, and then back down. So with two hands together, it sounds like this. The most important thing is to get really loose before you go on stage and play live. In this Brahms expansion exercise, the great thing is because you contract your hand and then you expand your hand. So you're really kind of like doing a small exercise, almost like this, just getting your hands ready to do whatever, technical task you really have to do on stage. I think practicing arpeggios is really, really important. And playing arpeggios slow and playing them fast is really a different thing. Because let's look at a C arpeggio. If you're going to play C, E, G with fingers 1, 2, and 3, and then get to the next C, you really have to hold down the G and turn a little bit while your thumb goes under to C again. So there's going to be a little bit of a possible elbow motion going up. That's when you play slow. But when you play it faster, your thumb can get into the new position without having to raise your elbow. And that's your goal, is to play the G in this case, hold the note, but then while your thumb is going under, your hand gets into the new position. This good way to practice it is just doing exactly what I'm doing right now. Just aim for the C with your thumb without raising your elbow up. And do it kind of fast. So, practice them slowly with the metronome. And then maybe speed up your metronome and play it a bit faster without doing the arm thing. A technique that I've been using to really focus in my hands and my mind is taking different chords. Like in this case, I take a C7 chord, C, E, G, B flat, and then I go to a D flat 7 chord, D flat, F, A flat, C flat, or also called B. And then going up to the very next possible position of C, C7, and then going up to D flat. So the next note would be F, and playing a D flat chord from there, and then a C7 chord in the next note. So you end up going up a scale, but only repeating two chords, C, D flat, C, D flat, C, D flat, C. The left hand does the mirrored version of it. So you start on C, and then you go down to the next possible note and do your D flat 7 chord. Down to the next possible note, which is B flat, and then down to the next possible note, A flat, to G for the C7 chord, to F for the D flat 7 chord, to E for the C7 chord, D flat, C. Now let's put it together, and you can see as one hand mirrors the other hand. Turn on my metronome. I'm starting on E and starting on C. Now, also try it with a couple of other chords. Let's take E dominant 7th and F dominant 7th. Same thing. This is an awesome trill exercise that you could try. The right hand is playing from G, like this. So G, F, G, F, E, F, E, D, E, D, C, D, and then back. C, D, C, D, E, D, E, F, E, F, E, F, and then to the next key. The left hand does the exact mirrored image. So together it's like this. You start on C in the left hand, in triplets. Next key. D. Etc. It's also very important to become very aware of your finger independence. Your finger independence is the real key to strength. A lot of times I'll see people playing and they'll do a scale like, but it sounds like we got kind of mushy and a little bit weak. You want to have each finger really be a little independent hammer. To get that happening, it's all about finger independence and strength. To practice that and to become aware of it, I would recommend the following. Play from C all the white notes up to G. Hold them all down. While you're holding them all down, make sure your wrist is relaxed, but make sure that your fingers feel like they're pulling in a little bit on the notes. At the same time as that, you want to feel like there's a little bit of a ball like under your palm. You don't want to be overly rounded. You don't want to break in your little joint there, but you want to kind of have a relaxed but firm grip on the keys. The other thing is, don't have your elbow up real high and don't have it real low. It has to be fairly right angle with the keyboard, and the wrist should be loose. It looks a little like this. Okay, with that in mind, then you want to take your fifth finger, lift it up, holding down all the other ones, lift it up as high as you can, not your whole arm, but just your finger, and then slam it down on the key. When you slam it down, don't move your arm. And don't turn it or anything. Now, do that with your fourth finger. Lift it up. I know it's hard to lift it up. If it doesn't come up as high as you think it should, well, take it very gently with the other hand and just give it a little tiny push up just to kind of help it a little bit and support it. And then see if you can hold it where you put it. And then come back down. And then do the same with your third finger. Do each one, 4 to 8 times on your own. Making sure not to get tight in the arm. If you need to, just move your elbow around for a second just to see if it's loose. Then put it back in place and try your second finger. Lift it up high and let it come down. Get some strength. And then your thumb. Again, don't do anything weird with your body. 4 to 8 times. And then after you get that done, do the same thing with your left hand. After you're done with that, put your fingers down again and try this. Try lifting up your fifth and your third fingers. So on the notes G and E, just those. And come down with those. Now do it with D and F. Hold everything else down. And now with C and E. After you do that, then see if you can hold everything down and do like triplets between E and G. So da 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 da. Accent, accent, accent. Don't get your arm involved. The only thing your arm should do is if you look back at your arm, you could see that your tendons are kind of moving because they have to. Then 4 and 2. Everything else is held down. 3 and 1. Now finally, with the same notes all held down, see if you can lift the C, the E, and the G. Good luck. Just lift them all up and play the chord. Do it again. Now lift up D and F. Everything else is held down. Now back to C, E, and G. Now D and F. And try to alternate that. The beauty of this is that you can also practice this on your desktop. You don't need a keyboard around. I recommend it highly. If you're at school, just put your hand on your desk, put your whole arm down on your desk. Don't lift up your wrist, do anything weird, just keep it down, and then do the exercise where you just hold things down and just lift up your finger and play like that. It'll be almost as effective as playing the keyboard, in some ways more, especially if you hold your arm flat down on the desk and just use your fingers to do this exercise. This is an exercise that I actually learned from my Juilliard teacher, and it's been one of my favorite exercises since I initially learned it. It's cool because it's kind of harmonic, and it also is great for your fingers. What it involves is taking a C major sixth chord, like the notes C, E, G, A, and C, but starting out with C and G with your fifth and third finger, and then A and E with the second and fourth, and then C and G with the first and third, and then going back, so you're playing this. Then you make one small switch, which is that the E will go down to E flat, and by moving the third being from C, moving it down a half step, now it's minor. So all the other notes stay the same. So you play C and G, A and E flat, and C and G. Now again, only changing one note, you're going to move the G down to G flat. So now you're playing diminished. Again, moving one note, you're going to take the A and move that down to A flat. So that becomes dominant, the dominant A flat chord. Then you take the whole thing and move it to D flat. And what's beautiful about that is the final chord you were on from the C was an A flat 7 chord, which is the 5-7 chord of the next key you're going to. So the left hand will do a mirrored version of that. You'll start on C and G in the left hand, go to E and A with 4 and 2, and then you'll go to C and G with 1 and 3, and do that again. Lower the third to E flat, lower the fifth, which was G, to G flat, lower the A to A flat, and then on to the D flat major sixth chord. So you put those together, and it sounds pretty cool. It's like this. Now to the new key. Now I don't expect you to be going faster and faster. Matter of fact, what I prefer is get your click on. And try to keep it steady. Stay loose, not too tight. By that point, you're probably getting a little tense or tired, so make sure to shake out your hands again. You could also try the shorten and bread exercise with triplets. So in the right hand, you could play C-A-G, then A-G-E, and then G-E-C, and back to A-G-E in this kind of a rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then to minor. Of course, you want to try this in mirrored positioning, so the left hand's going C-E-G, E-G-A, G-A-C, E-G-A. Together, it's like this. Accent, accent, accent. But keep your arms still. Minor. Diminished. Dominant. You could also try holding the whole chord down, and again, just lifting up, like C and G together. And then the middle two notes, the E and the A. And then the bottom, C and G. Also, I recommend taking like the top C and G with your right hand and the bottom C and G with the left and playing in triplets like that, like. And accent, accent, accent. Then do it between A and E, and hold the other notes. Then between C and G. You could continue on in all the keys. By this time, you're probably very warmed up and almost ready for the gig. Sometimes when I play in my group Dream Theater, the material gets quite challenging. There's a couple of really long 16th note runs in our music that it's really important to walk on stage loose and relaxed, and also while you're playing to not overplay and to try to lay back as much as possible. Otherwise you could be brought to the hospital because of severe arm damage. This particular run, In This Dying Soul, is like a 2-page experience that goes on and on. So the most important thing is to just use your fingers, not to use your arm, and just try to relax and even breathe, dare I say, while you're playing it. Here's how it goes. There's another place in our set that's often quite challenging. It's the unison in the Name of God. It's a series of very fast notes that once again you have to remain very calm and very loose, and you have to pray a lot. Here's the riff. This is a really interesting passage because in addition to playing a unison line with Petrucci, I'm also playing some very large chords in the left hand. So I have this sound in the right hand and this sound in the left. So together it's like this.